Mark chapter 10, verse 32 to 45, which is page 1015 in the Church Bibles. That's Mark 10:32. They were on their way up to Jerusalem, with Jesus leading the way, and the disciples were astonished, while those who followed were afraid. Again he took the 12 aside and told them what was going to happen to him. "We are going up to Jerusalem," he said, "and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him and spit on him, flog him and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise." Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. "Teacher," they said, "we want you to do for us whatever we ask." "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. They replied, "Let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory." "You don't know what you are asking," Jesus said. "Can you drink the cup I drink, or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with?" "We can," they answered. Jesus said to them, "You will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. But to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared." When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great amongst you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Well, thank you for your welcome, and it's a real privilege to be here this week on such a sort of significant, sad Sunday. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here. I don't know if you've come across the book, The Abuse of Power by Theresa May. It's not a book I've read, I have to admit, but reading reviews, I learned she talks about examples of institutions abusing their power. So the police and Hillsborough, or building regulators and Grenfell. And it's not just institutions. She mentions bullying and sexual misconduct at Westminster. And we could add in lockdown parties and stuff coming out of the COVID inquiry. And we could go much wider than the political world, the whole of the Me Too movement, George Floyd, sexism and misogyny in the corporate world. She was a bully. He was inappropriate. The abuse of power is a tragic reality that we are becoming increasingly aware of, and maybe something that we ourselves personally have experienced. Now, I mention that because in our passage, we hear what Jesus thinks about power. And not only do we get his thoughts about power, we also see how he measures up himself, how he uses power in his own life, and whether his walk is as good as his talk. So let's start with thinking about the abuse of power. We hear about these 2 followers of Jesus, James and John, and they come to Jesus and they say, verse 35, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask." It's a worrying start, isn't it? Parents will be very alive to this tactic. Promise you'll say yes to what I'm about to ask for. Jesus says, "What do you want?" They say, verse 37, "Let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory." Now, I think this is an abuse of power. We're going to come to that. But they do get one thing right. They realize that Jesus, to use their phrase, is going to be in glory. Now, glory is not a word we use a lot today. It means really a mixture of power and authority and recognition and celebration. So what they mean is Jesus is the one with power. He's the one in charge of this world. And one day he'll be recognized as that. He'll be celebrated and crowned as king of the world. Glory. Some time ago, someone asked me, if there's a God, why doesn't he just prove himself to us? There's a few answers you can give to that, but for once I said, what do you want him to do? And he said, I don't know, something with the stars. And I said, what, you mean if all the stars lined up in a cross one night, would you become a Christian? And he said, no. I said, of course not. There'd be a lot of fuss, there'd be some explanations, and then life would carry on as normal. So I was warming to my theme now. I said, well, come on, what do you want him to do? And he said, well, just come and show that he's in charge, control everything, heal people. I said, what, control the weather? And he said, yes, control the weather and demonstrate he's the one in charge. And I said, that's Jesus. And I mention that because that's what these followers of Jesus have been through. They've seen this man heal people, overcome evil, stop a storm, raise the dead, and they've moved from, who is this, to, oh, you're the one in charge. You run this world. You're God. And Jesus agrees with them. Later in this passage, he refers to himself as the Son of Man. It's a phrase which refers to a figure who has supreme power and authority and adoration, and all the peoples of the world celebrate him. And Jesus says, that's me. So James and John are right. One day Jesus will be in glory, seen to be the one in charge. And so they say, when that happens, can we sit next to you? They would like some reflected glory. They want some power and in chargeness for themselves. Verse 41, when the 10, that's the other disciples, heard about this, they became indignant. They're upset when they hear that James and John are trying to get the best seats. It may be because it's wrong to be so grasping. It may be because they wanted those seats for themselves. Either way, it leads Jesus to talk about the abuse of power. Verse 42, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. When he talks about Gentiles, he's talking about the non-Jewish sort of secular world. And in that world, rulers lord it over others or exercise authority over others. They use their power to get what they want. They tell people what to do. And at one level, that's fine, isn't it? We need leaders. We need someone in charge. We need someone to make a decision. But I call it an abuse of power because it's power for me. The sense here is that the person with power uses it to get what they want. I'm in charge, so I get served. It's the same as James and John wanting to be next to Jesus. They want power for them, so they're in charge. It's the same with the abuse of power we see around us today. Power for me, using my position for what I want. In fact, I think we could say this really describes the human condition. We all have a problem with power. Those reviews of Theresa May's book went on to criticize her for her abuse of power. In particular, her role in the Windrush scandal as Home Secretary. She points the finger at abuses of power. They say the finger's pointing at you. And I think Jesus would say the finger He's pointing at us too. Now, most of us don't have much power to abuse. We're not CEOs or politicians, but we can still use what sort of influence we have for ourselves, to serve ourselves. Some years ago, someone told me that I was controlling in relationships. And if you know me, you may know I'm quite laid back, and you might think that sounds a bit unfair. And I think in some ways it was a bit unfair. But as I reflected on it, I could see in my relaxed way, I would make comments, I'd try and steer things, so I got what I wanted. I wanted to be in charge. And Jesus says we're all like that. We all want to be in charge. Later in Mark's Gospel, Jesus is asked what's the most important thing to do. And Jesus says, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. He made you. He gives you everything you have. He should be at the center of your life, the one in charge, and you love him for that. But Jesus is also clear that left to ourselves, we don't love God like that. We don't let him be in charge. We love ourselves and we put ourselves in charge. That's what I mean by saying we have a problem with power. God should be the one in charge, but easily we make it us. So, where have we got to? Jesus is the one who's truly in charge, the one in glory, the King of the world. But James and John, leaders today, all of us actually, have a problem with power. We all want to be in charge ourselves. That's the abuse of power. Secondly, let's think about the true use of power. Let me read verse 45. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus is the Son of Man, that's the one in charge of the whole world, who deserves the adoration of everyone. But he says he came not to be served, but to serve. It's completely upside down and the wrong way around. He didn't come to have people adore him and do stuff for him. He came to do stuff for them. This isn't like a politician visiting a homeless shelter and having a go at serving some soup. So you get a photograph of them in an apron, pouring out a bowlful, and 10 minutes later they're back in their limo being driven home. And it's not like the TV show Undercover Bosses, where the CEO comes down onto the shop floor and sees what it's really like, and then after a couple of weeks they reveal their identity. This is the Creator, the one actually in charge of this world, coming to his world and not pretending to serve. He lives the whole of his life serving. And not just his life, he says he'll die to serve us. This is a different sort of power. This isn't power for me. This isn't power so I get served and get what I want. It's power for you. Using my power to serve you. And he does it all the way to his death. Now, you might think, nice idea. But how does Jesus actually serve us? What does this actually mean in practice? Well, notice Jesus says he will give his life as a ransom for many. So if we're going to understand Jesus' use of power, we've got to understand this word ransom. Now, I'm so old, this reminds me of the Mel Gibson film, Ransom, in the 1990s. His boy's kidnapped. They demand $2 million to get him back. That's the ransom. That's the price to buy his freedom. And Jesus is talking about something pretty similar. He's talking about paying a price to set us free. The problem is, we would easily think, yeah, but I haven't been kidnapped. I'm not tied up and wanting to go home. So why is Jesus talking about a ransom? Well, let me try and explain how I think Jesus would see it and see our situation. I said earlier, Jesus says the greatest commandment is to love God with everything we have and everything we are, but we haven't done it. We put ourselves in charge. So we could picture it like this. Say God's over here, and I think I would like to know God. I want to go to him and be with him and live with him, be in his perfect world. But if I go towards God, this is what happens. It's a list of all the ways I live with myself in charge. Some of them are okay, some of them are good. Some of them I'm quite ashamed of. But at the heart of all of it is, I'm in charge, not God. Actually, there should be more than one list. It should go like this. And they're like bars on a prison cell. And in here, I'm trapped. And I can't go to God. I can't know God. And Jesus says, in here, I'm in real trouble. Now, I realise we don't often, or maybe ever, think of ourselves like that. It doesn't feel like that. We feel free. We're not trapped. But that's because a lot of the time we live our life like this, with myself in charge, doing what I want. And this way I feel okay. But the bars are still there. And Jesus says, I'm still in trouble. Real trouble. And if we begin just to get a taste of that, then these become the most amazing words. Even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus' death is the ransom price to set us free. Because when Jesus dies, he takes all this onto himself and he pays for it. He pays the ransom price for it. He deals with it. So it's all gone. And now I can know God. I can know him as my Father. I can know his love. I can be accepted by him, forgiven by him. I can have a relationship with him. One day I will live with him face to face in his perfect world. I have been set free. I have been ransomed to know God. Jesus pays the ransom to set us free. He doesn't have to do it. No one made him do it. We don't deserve it, far from it. But he chooses. He chooses. The one with all the power in the world chooses to serve us. Personally, I find this the most extraordinary and beautiful thing. I don't think you will find anything like this in any other religion or philosophy or worldview. That the God figure, the one with all power, deserving of everything from us, would serve us and pay our ransom. I said at the start that some of us might have been on the receiving end of an abuse of power. We've known the hurt and the injustice and the betrayal of that. And if that's you, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for that. And I hope you find the support you need. But I also want to say Jesus isn't like that. He has power, absolute power. But he uses it for you. It's the most beautiful and wonderful thing in the world. It means you can trust him. It means he won't take advantage. He won't abuse. It's power, but it's power to serve you. One last thing for us to think about. Jesus calls his followers to copy his use of power. He says the Gentiles, the secular rulers, lord it over each other. Then verse 43, not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served. Jesus is saying that if we want to accept his ransom, to accept him as our king and our rescuer, and we put our faith in him, and we follow him, having been served by him, we now copy that. And we serve like that. If we're Christians, that's what we're called to. We're to use our abilities and our gifts and our opportunities and our time and our energy, our power, if you like, to serve other people. Now, you're saying goodbyes today, the Schmidts and obviously Jeremy and Dawn. I was going to say, at this point, Jeremy and Dawn, isn't it wonderful how they have served like Jesus? But I think you would listen to me say that and think, how do you know? You weren't here. You're a new boy. And you would be quite right. So what I did instead was ask some of you what you would say about Jeremy of Dawn. One person said, they serve us all so cheerfully, expecting nothing in return, and so often at a cost to themselves. Another said, the way they have served and loved us has made me feel adopted into their family. Jeremy and Dawn would both drop everything to talk and pray with you if you needed it. Their door is always open. They served sacrificially, no job too menial. And I could go on and on. But what I do want to say is, do you know why they're like that? It's because they know the one who has all the power in the world. And they know he has served them by dying for them. And that then shapes them. Not perfectly, but it shapes them. And they live a Jesus servant-shaped life, using their abilities and opportunities and energy to serve others. And so, of course, you're very sad to see them go. Who wouldn't be? But I hope you can be sad with gratitude for them and say to God through the tears, thank you for people who have served us like Jesus. And this is what we're all called to, this example. This is what I'm called to as I come in September as your new minister. If you have a spare prayer in the next how many ever weeks, I would love you to pray that I would be captivated by Jesus serving me, so I would be a true servant. And for all of us, whatever our role, whether we lead groups or we're just a friend to somebody or with a colleague or with family, we are to use our power, all we have, our abilities, our time, our energy, to serve. Because Jesus has served us. The abuse of power, we want to be in charge instead of God. The true use of power, Jesus serves us supremely by dying for us to ransom us. And the example, we're called to follow and serve like that.